Welcome to the No Limit Selling Podcast, where industry leaders share their advice on how you can become better, stronger, faster. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the No Limit Selling Podcast. Today we have the privilege of having Sheevaun Thatcher with us here today. She is with Salesforce. Welcome.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
So Sheevaun, we had the privilege of being at the Sales 3.0 conference in Vegas this year. What was the highlight of the conference for you?
The highlight for me was the ability to get in front of a lot of the CROs that were there, hear what their most pressing issues were. And in my case, because I focus on the enablement side of the business, revenue enablement, and making sure everybody gets what they need in order to be able to do their jobs, is to see if I could align what I had heard from different levels within an organization with what the CROs believed was the challenge.
So tell me about one of the things that aligned and something that seemed to be quite different when there was a big gap between the two.
So there was a lot of alignment on the fact that getting customers to pay attention right now is a challenge, just given the fact that budgets have been cut, everything else. That how do you make yourself sound different and behave differently? And where I still see a lot of the gap is, how do we take advantage of the folks that we already have in organizations, and rather than continue to cut from an OpEx perspective, how do we take those resources and how do we use them better? How do we use them in a way that is going to be more effective in order to move the companies forward?
Absolutely. And it's always, well, let's start off with the definition of sales enablement so everyone's on the same page, because I think there's a bit of confusion on exactly what that is. It seems to be a moving target, and I don't think it is. So if you could give us a good definition.
I mean, from a very high level definition, it means that we are a force multiplier in helping sellers or anybody customer facing make the right impact with their customers to help their customers buy, essentially. And so in a more detailed, I talk about what are called the 4 pillars. The 4 pillars for enablement for me is essentially the charter of enablement, which is, first of all, is what I call the go-to-market messaging, or did they get the memo? Which means everybody in the company understands what the go-to-market messaging is, understands how to actually speak about it, and that it has trickled down throughout the whole organization. All too often, the board or executive leadership to say, "Hey, it's what we're going to do," and they don't tell anybody. And so it can be difficult if you're a soldier on the street and you're going in a different direction from what the go-to-market is. So that's really important, is number one.
Hold that just for a moment, because oftentimes in organizations, there's an illusion at the top that, ask anybody in the organization, they're going to give you the same message. And when you ask, it's not the same. So talk to me about this, why they have this illusion that it is happening. Like, what's the disconnect?
I think the disconnect is because they say it's happening. They see maybe the main website, the public website changes for the new go-to-market. But what they're not seeing is that sellers are out there using old decks. They're using decks that they're comfortable with, that have not been modified, where the messaging is not right, where it's off, where, you see copyright dates from, 10 years ago, things like that, right? This is where you really go, oh, wait a minute, something's not right here. And a lot of it is just, they either do not understand it, they have not been run through it, and they haven't practiced actually saying the words and saying what goes on. And so you have senior leadership going, the people that are coming to us understand it. It's right there on the website. Why can't we sell? Because the folks that the sellers are working with aren't there anymore. They're down here somewhere. They're not getting that new updated web page. They don't care. They don't go back to it. It was a one-time thing.
Interesting, because that's always a disconnect between leadership and what's happening on the ground, and there needs to be like a two-way street. So that's pillar 1. What's pillar 2?
So pillar 2 is, speaking of websites, pillar 2 is all the content, all the assets, all the decks, all the messaging, all the outbound scripts, everything that you're using in the way of an asset to get that message across. It's all on the same message. And it's the current message, right? And that is really what the second pillar is about. That's really around content, assets, making sure that there is a consistency to what that is and what it looks like. So no matter how your prospects or customers are coming to you, that they are seeing and hearing the same thing. And it's the message that you want to put out there right now.
And how do you, like on a sales situation, we can have an autopsy, like we went in, this was the deal, it worked really well, this way it worked well, or it didn't work well, and we can actually dig down to what the problem is. Do you see on the marketing side of things, where you take a look at the content that was created, whether it's effective or not? Is there a feedback loop typically?
Sort of. Like some companies will do win-loss analysis, things like that. Typically, though, that's just around the numbers. And it's like, okay, what did you do wrong in the sales process? It doesn't really have to do with what was the conversations that you really had with your customers. When I talk about enablement, my stakeholders are not necessarily the folks inside my organization. My ultimate stakeholders are the customer. The customer is not understanding what we're doing and they're not buying from us, then there's no reason for us to be a company, right? If we can't articulate our why and we can't say that so that a customer goes, okay, I've already done a lot of research, Chat GPT, I've looked at everybody and y'all look like the same thing. Why should I work with you? If the rep cannot articulate that quick based on what they know in the practice and what they've done, then all of that content and all the marketing isn't going to be worthwhile. I mean, one of the things I talk to marketing about is when you want to give customer facing folks something to put in front of our customers, it has to answer two questions. First one is, as a seller, I'm going to use seller, whether it's acquisition, retention, wherever it is in the company. As a seller, I want to know what's in it for me, right? How is this going to help me as a seller do my job better, adapt professionally, coach, whatever it is, what's in it for me? And then the second thing is, and this is really important, how is it going to help my customer buy from me? All too often what you see with content coming from marketing is, here's how we think you should sell it. That's not necessarily a good thing, right? You're in marketing for a reason. We're in sales for a reason. So tell us the top 5 to 10 open-ended questions that we should be asking at sellers, aligned with the go-to-market message, aligned with that we'll find out whether or not this customer even cares or has thought about this. And if they haven't thought about it, what are the open-ended questions we can use to start to get their mind working, perhaps create a compelling event, right? Whatever that is, that's what I want from marketing. I don't want a brochure.
And pillar 3 would be?
Pillar 3 is, now that we have all this stuff, how are the sellers able to actually get it? Is it a pull? Is it a push? What's the modality? Is it something I can print out and take with me? Is it a visual cue? Is it a demo? Is it a, whatever it is, are all of these assets and everything that we've done, are they available at the time of the actual activity? Whether that activity is driven by a customer or that activity is driven by a sales process, doesn't matter. Is it available at the time? So I hear a lot of people talking about this. Well, we've taught our people how to fish. Yay. All right. Well, you can teach them how to fish and they can fish and they can fill their bucket. But if they don't know what's in the bucket right at the moment, what's going to happen to the bucket?
Right.
It's going to rot. It's never going to be used. And by the time they go to use it, it's like, ooh, that's not going to work. And they have to fish again. Instead, what you want to do is make it so it's activity based. I need this now. And either I can go and get it, so it's easy for me to find, right? So again, content, it's easy for me to find, or I know because of where they are in the process, let's automatically serve up some of these things that either have high recognition, high value, have proven to work in the past for this particular persona or vertical or industry, whatever it is you want to get across, let's serve up the right information at that time as well. So that's pillar 3.
And pillar 4?
Is the tribal feedback. Did it work? Is anything working? If it is working, how do we make sure that we feed that back in to the beginning of the process so that marketing knows this works, let's do more of that. And we can tell the sellers that worked here, let's do more of that. And if it doesn't work and we're not getting a response, let's figure that out early and let's just stop doing it. Don't do that anymore. Right. But you need a feedback loop to enable to do that. Win-loss is when an opportunity has come to the very end. Sometimes that's too late. If they're dropping out early, You need to know that much, much sooner than you have a loss or you have a, right? There just needs to be much more of a feedback loop.
So many moons ago, I was trying to get some PR press coverage and was not getting any love whatsoever. Even though I'm cute, it didn't help whatsoever. And so a friend of mine that was in media said, "Hey, Umar, it's a really good pitch that you're doing, but there's one thing missing. It's a paragraph that goes, 'This is what the segment will be like.'" So the booker can go, "Oh, I totally get what this segment's going to be like." They don't have to think about it. They just know, and either they go yay or nay. And all of a sudden they started getting booked. And the reason I set that up is when when enablement actually enables the Salesforce, how do we get them to really understand what's the intention of this piece so they actually don't have to figure it out? Like there needs to be some kind of, because oftentimes you can give people the tools they need, but they don't use it in the way it was intended. So how do you kind of bridge that gap?
It's the why. It's getting them to understand why it matters. How is what it is that we're doing right now, whether that is a piece of content, whether that's a training, whether that is a new process, whatever that is, how is that going to help them be much more effective with their constituents in order for them to become recognized as either the expert or the person that that particular customer, whether it's customer prospect, I'm using customer in either case, where that customer recognizes, I want to work with these people, right? So whatever that is what you need the sellers to understand. Like, this is why this matters. Here is what we're seeing in the market. Here is what other people in that role, in this particular vertical, with this particular need, are doing right now. Here's what they're searching for on the generative AI tools. Here's what we're hearing in the conferences. Passing that information along to say, this is why it matters. If sellers understand why it matters, then that is actually what's going to go into the conversation, because it's quite possible they're dealing with somebody that doesn't know that that matters. So that's really what you need to do.
So how do you fit into, so you've got business development, you've got sales, you've got marketing, sales enablement. So get me a better sense of how you fit in, because it seems like you have a much closer relationship to marketing than the traditional sales side, like kind of bridge that gap, or am I reading that right?
I like to use, imagine three things. You've got a telescope, you've got binoculars, and you've got a microscope. Okay. So the microscope is sales ops, rev ops, whatever you want to call it. These are the folks that are looking at the data, doing the analysis, imagining what's going on, lead gen, all that. Those are those folks. They are the microscope. They're looking deep, deep down deep. The telescope is much more of the sales leadership and marketing and some of the others saying, where are we going? What does the future look like? Let's look out further to see where we could be going to. That's the telescope. We are the binoculars in the middle. We are the ones that can see up close and we can see far away, right? And we know what these folks think they're seeing, and we know what the data is telling us. How can we marry the two so that we've got it so we can actually see it, right? Because a lot of the telescope work is out there, right? Maybe there isn't a whole lot of proof, but we think that's what's happening. With the binoculars, it's there. You got it. You can see it. So that's kind of where enablement is. We are the one group within an organization that typically talks to every other group in the company.
So you see the big picture.
We see the big
granular. Yeah.
Right. And provided we've got the relationships that we need, so that strategic partnership with sales, that strategic partnership with marketing, provided we built those bridges, then we can be the ones to bring it all together.
Excellent. So on the marketing side of things, oftentimes they have to divine what customers want in the future. And sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're not. So how does that work at Salesforce? Like, how do they get a finger on their customers and what solutions would be needed 2 years from now? Yeah, are they thinking?
There isn't really that much I can say about Salesforce at this point.
Oh, okay.
I haven't been vetted.
Just generally, if you can answer that generally, how does that work?
I think it works like every other marketing organization, right? It's what does the data tell us? What are our customers telling us? We're coming out of Dreamforce, right? This huge conference.
Mm,
What did we hear? What are we hearing? Are we hitting the mark? How many demos were done? What were they done about? Right? And they had tons of customer meetings and they had, right? All of that is all now going to be brought together and decisions will be made way above my pay grade. But there
right.
are, all of these things feed in. The one thing I will say about the Salesforce marketing organization is it's massive. It's massive. And that's one of the reasons why the company is so big and so well recognized. How it actually works internally, I have no idea. I don't have a clue.
So when you are massive like Salesforce, and actually I can see their Canadian office right through my window, the sign taunts me every day, come Umar, come say hello. There is a perception of who they are in the marketplace, as in what customers think of them. And as we communicate, sometimes there's a disconnect between the two. So how do you balance that? There's a blessing being such a big brand name and having such great reviews, but also it can define you in a way that, things are changing all the time.
Yeah. Again, I can't talk about Salesforce. I cannot speak
Sure.
about them.
So
Yeah.
going to just a general, so the question was around Salesforce, but pull it back and just give me a general kind of sense of things. Because when you're a small company, nobody knows you. So you've got a challenge of, you don't know us, but we should do business. And when you have a brand name, which really helps you open doors, but sometimes you get defined in a way that may not be as accurate as you want the customers to feel about you.
Well, I mean, I think that's a fight that every single company is dealing with. Doesn't matter whether it's massive and a multi tens of billion dollars company like Salesforce, or it's a small mom and pop shop, right? When the world changes and the macroeconomics that we're in right now, or we find that, all of a sudden this generative AI has become this big thing, right? When the world changes is how are companies going to adapt to that? How are they going to recognize, is it a real change or is it just a fad? Right. I mean, I think AI is here to stay. I think the explosion of all the companies that are now jumping on the bandwagon, how long are they going to last? Who's to know? I think once we start seeing government intervention and we start seeing, ethics come into it and security and all, I think that the numbers will drop pretty significantly. But it's one where companies just have to, what are their customers talking about? And it's that customer relationship that is really what's going to drive what a customer does, right? You can't ignore the customer, whether they're happy or sad.
Absolutely.
And it is, proactively finding out what's going on in your world. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's a Salesforce or it's a Tim Hortons,
Right.
or it's a gas station. It doesn't matter.
So there was a slide because I asked you, what was one of the takeaways from Salesforce? One of the ones for me was there was a slide that somebody put up, and it was from about 4 months ago. All the AI tools for sales enablement,
Yep.
and it was like it had smallpox. It was like a slide with like hundreds of different solutions, and then just kind of put a bow on it, either in that presentation or another one. They were saying companies that are highly successful are using 4 AI tools to help them succeed. And companies that are not as successful are using 20 to 30. So there's something to be said for, when people do really well, we kind of have a small set of tools and we use them really, really well. And when we're not, we tend to just buy a lot of tools and go. So any advice to people out there, how to kind of hone in on what's the most useful? Let me put more frame on it. Any kind of sports team, if they're not doing well, the new coach comes in, the very first thing they say is, we're going to go back to the fundamentals. So in your mind, in working with a lot of companies, for a sales organization and sales enablement, what are the fundamental stuff that they should not let go of? Like they're the tried and true.
If you think about enablement as, and I've heard it described this way, and I love this, as we are the strength and conditioning coaches, especially in the sports analogies, that's who we are, right? We don't play on the field, right? That is the coaches and the players and the special coaches and the, whatever, they play on the field, regardless of the game. We are in the background making sure that the players are as well conditioned and understand the game as best as possible. So when they go out there, they do their best work. So that's who we are. We're the strength and conditioning coaches. So strength and conditioning coaches use equipment of some time or another, whether that equipment is tools or otherwise. But let's be very, very clear. It doesn't matter what tool you're using. If your processes aren't right, if your basic selling skills are not there, if your frontline managers are not coaching, if they aren't doing these fundamental skills, doesn't matter what tool you put in somebody's hands. Like I can tell whether or not somebody is outbounding me by using ChatGPT. And how do I know that? Because the outbound email I get is now 5 to 7 paragraphs long, sounds beautiful, right? I mean, the wording is fabulous. It's very, it's all wonderful, but it's not, I want 2 or 3 sentences, right?
Yeah.
Where I am in my role, I'm not going to read that. If you don't get my attention in the first 2 or 3, doesn't matter how fabulous the prose is. I don't care, right? So that's how I know that chat's being used, because it helps people that may not be as well versed at writing or eloquent or whatnot come up with all this great stuff that they can use. However, what's missing is the ability to use a tool properly, which is, now that you've got all this elegant prose and all of these things, what really matters to the person that you're talking to? Because what ChatGPT thinks of value may not align at all. So it's understanding the value of the person. This is why anytime I hear somebody say, well, AI is going to replace sellers. No, it's not. AI doesn't have intuition. It doesn't have empathy. It doesn't have the ability to hear and understand and adapt like that. What it does do, though, is it could, for example, give the ability for a seller to talk to their customer, say, hey, come online with me on this Zoom. And let's go in here and let's start looking to see what we can pull together. Because what it does do is it connects the dots much faster than we ever could as humans. Things that maybe we never thought related. It can connect the dots for us. But if it's not used right, or it's not ethical, or you're just using it right out of the box, where it's just this bleh of stuff,
right,
then it doesn't matter how many tools you have. It's not going to matter. Like, for example, I saw a post yesterday and it was like, use this. It was 10 AI tools to use.
Right.
I thought, no, how about I continue to use my notepad? Yay, that works. It was crazy, but it was, all of a sudden, all these companies are coming up with, the next best thing. We've seen this happen before. It happens over and over again.
I was at talking to someone who's a gun expert. Like, you wouldn't want to give me a gun, but I'd ask the question, what caliber gun should I get? He said it doesn't make a difference. If you don't know how to use it, don't bother. And it's same with the tools. So going back to a message to you as a VP, what are your thoughts on those video platforms that allow a quick 30-second video? Do you have time for that? Or is it something that you would also kind of go, get me in the first 2-3 sentences or you've lost me?
If you get me the first 2-3 sentences and there's a video associated, I will typically watch the video. I think if it's a 5-minute video, forget it. But if it is a quick, hey, as long as it's about me and not about you, that's really where the difference is, right? That you've done enough research on me, or you understand the market that I'm in, or you understand what I do as a role. I can't tell you how many videos I get with, hey, being the VP of sales, you're concerned about, I'm like, delete.
No, not, yeah.
Right. Oh yeah. They just don't pay attention. I mean, it's just read my title. I mean, it's all, do a little research. If the video is about, here's what we're hearing, as opposed to, do you have this problem? Well, I'm not going to admit to you if I have any problem. But if you're seeing something in the market that you think I should be aware of, those are great. Those are the ones I'll listen to.
And some of the things you described is not AI, but as humans, because just as humans, oftentimes we're so focused on who we are and what we're selling, and don't take the time to figure out who the customer is and what they need and what their problems are.
Yeah, we talk about value selling all the time. But if you look at most companies, when they talk about value selling, it's what the company considers to be of value. Value selling in its real inherent form is to figure out what the customer thinks is of value and then adapt to figure out whether or not you can help them realize that value. And that is that's a big disconnect that I see all the time.
So as you do sales enablement and you say we are going after the uh, fisheries industry, and we have a good sense of what their problems are.
Mhm.
Not any particular fishery, but generally we know here are the top 5 problems that they have. So how do you help your salespeople navigate that? Hey, this is what we're finding. Here are the problems. By any chance, are you having any of these? Is it that kind of approach, or do you get them to research a particular company a little bit more deeply to figure out what might be the most important thing for them?
Well, this is where the marketing comes in, right? So the marketing gives us the open-ended questions we could be asking, right? And then we can take those questions and say, which one of these are actually going to fit to what it is I'm looking? Let me do some research. So when I'm asking this question, I can say from a personal perspective, because I actually saw it or listened to it or spoke with somebody who does it, I have that experience of some type where I can share that experience with this customer to say, these are the kinds of things we're seeing out here. How are you handling that situation? Whether it's good or bad. I'm not saying,
Right.
are you failing at it or what are you doing wrong or where does this break? It's like, how are you handling that? And it's that curiosity that is really driving these conversations. And that curiosity is what's going to open up the conversation with your customers. Because if you go in there saying, our people are telling us that these are all the things wrong in your industry, how is that, how are you, how is that affecting you? I'll bet that you have this challenge, right? I get emails like that and think, I'm not talking to you. You have no idea what's going on with me.
Right. So about pre-pandemic, there was a bunch of solutions. Cold calling is dead, but people that I know in the industry, it's still the best use of their time is actually if you can get a conversation with a potential buyer, it has high value. Are you still finding that the case today?
Yes, I don't believe cold calling is dead. I think how it's done, outbound prospecting, how it's actually done. I think the difference is in the past where we may have had sequences that were 10 different outreaches, now you're talking 20 per person. And instead of 2 or 3 people that you're reaching out to, now it's 10 or 15 people. So the magnitude of it has expanded significantly. We're seeing that. And the tools are adapting to some extent to help with those, but it's people giving up too early or not trying every single thing that they possibly can, or they're falling into the old traps where it's all about them, me, me, me. Hi, I'm so and so. I'm from here. Here's what I do.
Yeah, it's
I
actually
don't care.
my favorite story of it's about me is we do a fair amount of work with realtors, and it was this woman, Elaine Northrup, and her husband had gone to take this university course to be a realtor. And so on a Thursday, I says, sweetheart, we can't do anything this weekend. I have to study. I've got my test on Monday. And little lady, if you'd like to take the real estate test, you can take one too. And he's gone to university for 6 months to do this. And so she takes the test with him. And of course, she passes and he does not. And so about 3 months later, he runs away with her best friend and leaves her with 2 kids. And so she goes, as a school teacher, I don't think I can, look after my kids properly. I'll become a realtor since I have the training. And for 6 months, she doesn't get any deals whatsoever. He says, what I was doing was telling people, oh, poor me, my husband abandoned me. And it was, those conversations were about me, not the customers. And the broker finally said, you can't work here, but I want to make sure I treat you right. So I'm going to give you an assessment on what career you should be doing. And the answer comes back real estate. So he gives her a second chance, and something switches inside, and she just focuses on the customer and starts landing appointments. And she ended up becoming the number 1 realtor in Maryland, male or female. And so it was just a good focus on, it's not about us, it's about the people we serve.
Right, exactly. I know everybody loves to watch drama on TV and all of that, but when you're doing business, whatever's going on with you, I get that there's things going on in your life that I know nothing about, and I may not want to know anything about it. Right. And it's understanding that as well.
So how many people in your department, because sales organizations tend to be quite large, on the enablement side, depending on the company, do they tend to be larger, or is it a very small kind of team?
I think it varies on the type of enablement that the companies are expecting. So I've seen, like Salesforce, for example, the global enablement team is somewhere around 400 people, but it's also serving tens of thousands of sellers. I've seen armies of one. I was an army of one for many, many years because that was all that was needed at that point, because I didn't have a fully fleshed out enablement program. I didn't have full accountability. I didn't have my responsible not, for not to, or responsible to not for. I didn't have all that sorted out. And so all I did was training. And so it depends on how enablement is viewed. Like when I was at Ring Central, I built it from 3 people up to 162. But that was also bringing in other parts of the organization that weren't typical sales parts of the organization, right? So we did enablement for everybody. And then there's smaller ones. What I'm seeing is, the ratios that I'm seeing, if you're asking me what size should it be, the ratios I'm seeing are around 50 to 1. So 50 stakeholders to 1 enablement person, if the program is understood and is functioning well. If it's not functioning well, let's even go smaller. So Gartner's like 30 to 1. If it's functioning really well, I've seen them go to 100 to 1. And again, it depends on whether or not you're a strategic partner or not. If all you have is just a piece of the enablement, then I've seen things like 800 to 1. If all you're doing is like just delivering that piece, you're not doing the whole strategic partnership.
Nice. Before we part company, Sheevaun, what's one thing people need to know about enablement that isn't commonly known?
I think they need to know that we really are the strength and conditioning coaches. We really are the ones in the background that help you figure out what your goals are and then help you build a plan on how to get there and then help you get there. That's what we do, right? It's not, we're not going to come to you if it's done right and say, hey, here's what you need to do. It's having those conversations. It's being a partner in this. It's listening to all the voices. Enablement can help not only be part of that conversation, but actually get that conversation going. So all parts of an organization that are in support of the customer are doing the same sort of things that make sure the customer knows that the relationship they have with you as a company is better than any other company in your space.
I was talking to somebody on the podcast yesterday, and one of the things they said kind of struck me is the best salespeople they've seen in organizations are the ones that follow the processes doggedly. They tend to just be more successful than their counterparts, and so that's sales enablement. The conditioning and the training and making sure that they got the tools they need, they know how to use them, and they consistently do it. So hats off to enablement. Sheevaun, thanks so much for being on the show. I really learned a lot in this conversation.
It's been great.
Hang on. I'll see you once the show outro goes. If you enjoyed this episode, please go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. And if you're looking for more tools, go to my website at nolimitselling.com. I've got a free mind training course there that's going to teach you some insights from the world of neuro-linguistic programming, and that is the fastest way to get better results.